For this lab, we're looking at the pelvic inlet and perineum, and this is the equine specimen, so we're working on the pony. And you've transected your pony into pieces by this point, and so you've taken off the pelvis. So you've cut through the lumbar area and detached the hind end from the body, and you've also taken apart your thorax and your head. So you should have your head separated from your body. For this lab, you take that off, put it in a bag and store it, and then also your pelvis hind end will be separate and stored separately now. So here we're taking a look inside the pelvis, and so here we're inside the pelvis. I can just show you, here we would be on the right side, outside, and so I'm just going to hold it up so you can see into the pelvis as I show you some of these things for this lab to start with. And inside the pelvis, you're going to be pulling apart some layers of the peritoneum to see some of these structures. So you have what's left of your rectus abdominis muscles here. So you would have rectus abdominis here and here. Here you would have internal abdominal oblique muscle. And also on this side, we would have internal abdominal oblique muscle there. And here we have our prepubic tendon. So that's right here where your rectus abdominis muscles are inserting. Right here is that very thick prepubic tendon. Then in here we also want to look at the vaginal ring locale, so that's going to be in this area. I have a male specimen, so you can see the ductus deferens is here, and that's going into that vaginal ring, through the vaginal ring there. And so you also have your testicular artery and vein would be here, and the ductus deferens, and those create the spermatic cord that's going to run through that inguinal canal. So here we have the vaginal ring locale. Then you would be running through the deep inguinal ring, through the inguinal canal, and then we would come out the superficial inguinal ring as we exit the abdomen. So I'm going to flip this over and hopefully talk a little bit more about that. It's a little bit torn up in this specimen because I tore apart my layers, but hopefully you can still see. Here I would have what's left of the aponeurosis of the external abdominal oblique here. And so that's where that slit is that creates the superficial inguinal ring. So superficial inguinal ring would be right here. You would have spermatic cord and cremaster muscle here coming out. And here's the little testicle in this guy. So here's a testis here. And it was fairly undescended. It was not descended fully. So that's why it looks a little bit strange. And so here you would have superficial inguinal ring. Again, you'd be traveling through that inguinal canal, which is that passageway through the abdominal wall. And you would have your cremaster muscle coming off of that caudal edge of internal abdominal oblique. So you see that here. So now I've reflected that external abdominal oblique aponeurosis. You can see internal abdominal oblique muscle here, and you have this little slip coming off the caudal edge. And that's going to run alongside your spermatic cord then, and that's the cremaster muscle. So when I turn this over, you can see that it's running right on top of your spermatic cord, which would be here. So spermatic cord, and spermatic cord is covered in the vaginal tunic. Cremaster muscle here, and testis is here. All right, so then our deep inguinal ring is that one that's harder to see, and it's more of an idea rather than an anatomical, a distinct anatomical structure, I should say. So I'm going to flip it over again and try and put the probe into where that deep inguinal ring would be located. So right here, if you can see that probe kind of moving, that's where the deep inguinal ring would be located. So deep inguinal ring, inguinal canal is where it's traveling, and it comes out that superficial inguinal ring there. All right, so then we'll go back into the pelvis here and look at some of these arteries. So here we have our aorta, and we're going to look for the external iliac artery. So that's going to be here. So external iliac artery, and in this pony, the deep circumflex iliac is coming off of the external iliac, but it can come off of the aorta directly, or it can come off of the external iliac. You'll see both quite often. So deep circumflex iliac artery here, and also on this side. You can see that here, it loses its injection there, but same artery. So deep circumflex iliac on both sides. You have external iliac artery here. Then we're going to follow the external iliac artery and find where the deep femoral artery comes off. So I'll just turn it slightly. So we have external iliac. Here we have our deep femoral, is this branch coming off. You can see the continuation of external iliac is over here. So this branch is deep femoral. Then off of deep femoral, we have a pudendo-epigastric trunk. So that's going to be this part here, while that deep femoral will continue on. So continuation of deep femoral here, and pudendo-epigastric trunk is here. Then off of your pudendo-epigastric trunk, you'll have two branches you need to find. One is the caudal epigastric. So that will be here, running on the deep face of that rectus abdominis muscle. Then the other branch will be your external pudendal artery. And that's going to dive through. And I'm going to put my probe there and then turn this over. So you can see where that is coming out. Of course, my probe fell out. So there you can see the artery coming out. My probe is right here, and we'll flip it over so that you can see where that external pudendal is then coming out of that superficial inguinal ring area alongside what would be my spermatic cord there. So external pudendal artery is exiting in that same location here. So that's external pudendal. Then we'll go back inside, take a look at the other side as well. You have your external iliac, and it does the same thing, although this side branches slightly differently. And so that you know that this variation can happen, my pudendo-epigastric trunk on this side is coming directly off of external iliac. So that is different. And then my deep femoral is coming off further down here. So deep femoral is coming off separately. Pudendo-epigastric trunk is coming off separately. So that you know, you want to trace where the arteries are going, as always, and find where they're going before you name them, rather than relying on the branching patterns. So here, pudendo-epigastric trunk. Again, you have caudal epigastric, and then you have external pudendal. Okay, now we'll move on and follow the external iliac. So we're going to follow the continuation of external iliac. And we're actually going to do that on the right side, but I'll point it out here on the left side first. So we have continuation of external iliac here. That's then going to go through the vascular lacuna and go out to the limb. And on the left side, we removed our limb, so we don't have that limb attached. But on the right side, we do. So we're going to follow this external iliac as it's traveling out to the limb. And then I'll flip this over. Probe underneath. So here is where it becomes then femoral artery. So after external iliac is exiting the pelvis or the abdomen and it's coming out into the limb, then it's called femoral. So just a name change to femoral artery here. And now we'll move on and talk about the perineal region. So I'm going to flip this specimen over. And for this part, you're going to want to cut off the tail at the base. So you want to actually just take a saw and cut off the tail so that you're right at the base of the tail. That will just help in pretty much everything with this section. It will help your specimen sit on the table better. So you want to do that. And then we're going to look at the perineum. So the perineum is this perineal region, and that's extending basically from just ventral to the tail, and in my specimen all the way down to the scrotum, which would be down here. So this whole area is the perineal region. And so you're going ventral to the tail, down to the scrotum, and then your ischial tuberosities are kind of your lateral landmarks for that area. So this whole area is the perineum. And we're going to look at the muscles that make up the pelvic diaphragm and then also the external anal sphincter. So the external anal sphincter, you have to remove the skin very carefully in this area because it's very thin, but you can see the external anal sphincter here that surrounds the anus. And then we'll talk about the pelvic diaphragm. There are two muscles that make up the pelvic diaphragm, and you have them on both left and right sides. So you have the coccygeus, which is going toward the tail. So here's coccygeus. Then we have the levator ani. Your levator ani is running toward the rectum here, toward the anus. So levator ani, right there. Coccygeus going towards the tail. And those two muscles together make up the pelvic diaphragm. And your levator ani is going to appear to run right underneath this external anal sphincter. Then on the other side, we have the same thing. So again, external anal sphincter is here. We have coccygeus running up to the tail. And then we have levator ani here, going under your external anal sphincter. And levator ani and coccygeus together make up the pelvic diaphragm. Now for this specimen, it's a male, so we want to also look for our retractor penis muscle. And our rectococcygeus muscle is the other muscle we need to identify. So I'm first going to show you the rectococcygeus muscle, which will be in both male and female. But it's going from the tail to the rectum here. And so it's this white muscle, so it looks different. It doesn't look like a muscle. It's white because it's smooth muscle. So here I'll just put the probe underneath it so that you can see that rectococcygeus muscle. So extending from the tail to the rectum right there. Rectococcygeus. Then the other smooth muscle I was just mentioning is the retractor penis muscle in the male, retractor clitoris muscle in the female. But here in the male we have retractor penis that starts here on this side. And we'll have it starting on the other side as well. So you have it coming from both left and right sides. So here would be retractor penis here. Then they're kind of forming this subanal loop. They go underneath the anus, and they're going to come together and then run down the midline of the penis here. So retractor penis muscle will run all the way down that midline. So you would have the ischial arch, which is kind of this bony caudal aspect that is right here, and that's running across the pelvis along the midline here. So we're going across from left to right, and you have an ischial tuberosity on either side. So ischial arch is just this bony caudal aspect here.